All right. And let me share my screen. Can everybody see this? I certainly hope so. You know what I do want to do? Let me make this full screen view. There we go. All right. Again, I want to welcome you to tonight's exhibition opening of Fox. This is my second solo show that I have done specific to the idea of Fox. And I just want to talk a little bit about what Fox means to me and how I went into this body of work. I have always been a lucid dreamer with vivid recollections of nighttime adventures. I started dreaming of foxes early on in 2020. It's not that the nature of my dreams shifted in any way when fox began to show up. My dreams stayed the same, the storyline stayed the same, the other people who populated my dreams stayed the same. It was just that Fox invited herself over one night. She showed up and she decided to stay. Now, in my dreams, I'm usually the only one that sees her. She makes eye contact with me, or I can sense her. But meanwhile, the story of my dream is unfolding all around. She's almost always a blip around 7 o'clock in my line of vision. And then she slowly ambles across my line of vision. Or if she disappears altogether, I sense that if I turn around, she's right there behind me at my shoulder. Sometimes Fox leads me through complex spaces. Sometimes she's there just as a witness. Sometimes she has my back, and I really need to know that she's there. We've never really spoken. There isn't a language that we share so much as there's a learning. And the other thing that Fox has done is remind me that I'm connected to a history of ancient wisdom, that she's sort of the portal to that. Shortly after Fox showed up in my dreams, she started showing up in my days as well. She was trotting down the shoulder of a freeway in the middle of the day. She was on the sweater of a woman in the grocery line in front of me. Maybe she was unexpectedly mentioned in a book I was reading, or suddenly she's in a piece of artwork on the wall in a TV show. She actually became a tangible friend. I knew I could rely on running into her at some point almost every single day. Now, when an idea or an object or feeling repeatedly shows up in random ways, like Fox had been doing to me, I call that a wink. And my painting process in the studio cultivated a way of weaving my winks together well before Fox started showing up. So it was totally natural for me when she did show up to treat her as a wink and invite her to the easel. I thought of Fox as a container of possibility, not actually flesh and blood or a literal fox like we might encounter in our real lives, but something with mythical characteristics, a bit ethereal, not necessarily fully solid. It also wasn't lost on me that she showed up as a navigator during a particularly challenging time in our world. I imagined Fox was willing to carry my troubles or reveal solutions because foxes are known to be clever problem solvers, fearless and self-assured. So I set out to get to know Fox through my art materials from the inside out. And you're going to see basically 4 categories of artwork in tonight's show. You're going to see some actual paintings, of which Coexist here in the slide is one of those. You are going to see some foxscapes, and those are going to be landscapes with a fox element to them. You're going to see some mixed media drawings, and I'll speak specifically about those when we get to that point, as well as some recycled drawings or some works done on recycled materials. And then I will also show you a slide of some additional studies and other sorts of fun things that I did that fed the paintings. But what I want to talk about is how the work that I created collectively, not just these large paintings, but all of these other little pieces and studies, They all sort of fed each other. They gave me new ways to think about and approach painting fox. So she can hold the essence of a season or preserve the memory of a tree, like these two pieces do. She could tell the history of her corner of the world. She can speak to the eternal story of life or define hope. There's so many different ways that fox is going to show up in these paintings. And so I just want to walk you through some of the pieces, or not some. I want to walk you through the pieces in the show. I'm going to do it relatively quickly because I also want to make sure that we've got time for Q&A. I expect that will last about 45 minutes to an hour tonight, depending on how engaged you are with your questions at the end of the slideshow. But what you are looking at right now are on the left is a painting called Exhale, and on the right is a painting called Quince. And these are shown relative in scale to each other. These paintings are primarily acrylic, although there is a little bit of a mixed media element to them both. And the painting on the left, Exhale, the root inspiration for this piece was the unearthing of a memory that I had suppressed about sunburst locust trees. And I had some childhood memories of the beauty of them when they started to turn this, it's almost like a miraculously mustardy golden yellow, and the sunlight is patterned through them. And I had a moment where that memory just sort of resurfaced and hit me in a really powerful way, like at a cellular level. My whole body responded to it. And so, my initial reaction was, let's go and spend some time with these trees again, which I was able to do. And it happened to be September. So they were just starting to turn their color. And I spent some time with the trees, taking photos, studying the light. And then I came back to the studio and I made this painting on the left. And the piece on the right is called Quince. Quince is 48 inches high. Exhale is 50 inches square. And Quince is a little fox cub, and she is inspired or connected to my own personal love of the quince bush or shrub. I'm not really sure what the proper terminology is for a quince plant, but I have a really fond memory of my grandmother walking through the yard with me, the first house that we bought. And she was so excited that we had a quince shrub there. And it hadn't yet bloomed. We hadn't been in the house long enough for me to see it bloom. And she shared with me that that was one of her favorite plants to have or favorite plants that she had on the farm where she raised my father and aunts and uncles. And so every year since then, when the quince blooms, I think of her and I can feel her hand on my arm, and that relationship of a child looking up to an elder and having something that connects them tangibly, that reminds them of that relationship year after year. That's what the painting Quince is all about. Now, the installation of this work, the show, it was in a school or on a school campus. And the school itself houses pre-K through 12th grade students. And I had an opportunity to tour the gallery space ahead of time. And one of the things that I did was I decided that I wanted to group my larger paintings with the smaller pieces that inspired them. And so this grouping of Exhale and Quince together in the middle, they were flanked by these other studies that I did, which were or are fox drawings on recycled envelopes. And you're going to get to see a closer look at them in a couple slides further in. But I just wanted to talk about or share how the work was shown or hung for the students, because it was really important for me that the students see that a fully realized painting just doesn't show up. There's a lot of thought processes and thinking and experimenting and other things that happen that ultimately inform that painting. And so it was really important to me that the show sort of illustrate that in some ways so that the students could begin to look at a drawing and see it in a different light, or see some of the line work in the drawing and then go and try to find that similar line work in the painting. So here are two pieces that hung together. The one on the left is called The Quick Brown Fox. And she is really, to me, about the shape of a wild animal and how they sort of slip through the landscape. Sometimes we don't see them, we just see the movement of them, like a quick little flicker. But they also, in my head, or Fox in my heart, carries a history of all the landscapes that her ancestors have moved through. And she has a very deep love and respect for the earth. And so painting her in this way, like a beautiful sinuous S shape, and allowing the woods and the sky to carve or build up her form, was one of the ways that I could speak to that. The fox painting on the right is called Metamorphosis. And it's a painting about change. And I think it speaks to climate change as well as to cultural change, or humanity's change in their relationship with nature. Several generations ago, I feel like, of course, I wasn't here on the earth several generations ago, but my belief system is that several generations ago, humanity was closer to the earth, closer to seasonal shifts, more plugged in to what was happening in their environment than we are now. We get distracted with the noise of our world, with the busyness of our lives, with the demands of our lives, with social media. There's just so many things that are demanding our attention. And also, I feel like society is needing to make some changes and re-embrace our humanity. And so the idea of incorporating butterflies, which are perfect symbol of metamorphosis or change, as well as the magic of the ginkgo tree and a fresh new horizon inside the belly of the fox, those were some of the ways symbolically that I could speak to this idea. Now, Metamorphosis, just so you get a sense of scale, she is 30 inches by 40 inches, and the Quick Brown Fox is 24 by 36. This was, or is, the newest piece, or the last piece that I signed for the show. And this painting is titled Coexist. It's one of the few paintings of fox where there is another animal present. And rabbit is another one of my totem animals that shows up repeatedly in my life. And this painting was my response to the Palestinian-Gaza-Israeli conflict. And when that conflict escalated and the war began in that area, I felt very helpless. I felt very uneducated. I don't have a huge amount of understanding of those cultures and the generations of conflict in that area. And I just didn't really feel equipped to do anything but experience deep sadness for what humanity was doing to each other. And this painting came about as a result of that. And it was very important to me that the fox and the rabbit not be seen as predator and prey, but that they be seen as equals. And that the surface of the painting itself also spoke to sort of the scarring, the hurt, the history of compromise that happens inside any enduring relationship, and survival as well. And so, you know, I reached for things like a sunrise on on the brow or the profile of the rabbit, and the fox has her eyes closed, and there's this glorious sort of new moon rising behind her. There's a hint of blue sky between her legs, which are misshapen but still are able to carry her weight. There's just so much tenderness and hope in this painting, and I really felt like when I made it, it was a prayer of sorts. And that realization was so significant to me, because oftentimes as an artist who's painting their response to things in the world, I feel like what I'm doing doesn't really matter in the whole scheme of things. But actually, the sacredness of prayer and focusing energy into the world for change is a truly beneficial thing for communities and the world at large. So that was an important realization. And originally, I had wanted Coexist to be hung with these 6 foxscapes around her. Coexist is 48 inches high, I believe. And these foxscapes around her are 12 inches square. So I know my slide is a little skewed here. She should actually be larger in the center if it were truly to scale. Now, foxscapes were my way of exploring the concept of a landscape in an expressive way. My animal-centric paintings always have a landscape element to them, and it felt like it was usually pretty literal, although I took a lot of artistic license with how I chose to express it. But the foxscapes were really my own way of seeing how far I could walk away from a literal depiction of a landscape and just really push it and see how expressive I could make it, how simplified I could create, push my shapes. And at what point does the landscape dissolve and the painting just becomes pure abstraction? And the other thing why I call them foxscapes is that every landscape painting has a tiny little fox hidden in it in some capacity. And you'll get to see these up close further on. So these 6 12-inch foxscapes are really, I absolutely love them. And perhaps these close-ups will show you why. They have a huge history to them. There's so many layers that happen. They're primarily acrylic paint, but there's all sorts of pencils and crayons and other materials in them. You'll see that the paint is really scarred. I've carved into it. In some instances, I've built paint texture up really thickly. These paintings just happen. I don't have a game plan. I start with whatever color feels important to me. Sometimes I just close my eyes and float my hand over my palette box and see where it ends up. And they're built up of so many layers. Some of these have probably 30 layers of paint on them. So it's just a matter of me putting the marks down, seeing what they tell, what sort of shapes they might elicit. This painting felt to me very much like a sand dune or a beach sort of scene, some sort of hillock or sandy dirt mound. And, and then the sky shows up. And I just sort of continue to listen, respond, make a couple of marks, sit and look at the piece for a while. There's a lot of engagement that happens between me and just the surface. It's a way that I listen. I also learn. These abstracted paintings really taught me the power of a mark. When you stop thinking about a particular area on a surface as being relegated to sky space versus a foreground, you have so much more strength in your marks. Your marks sit there because of what they are. And actually, I think the slide's in here twice. So, but you have the opportunity to be so much more abstract because you're not thinking, I really have to contain my sky space here, or this is the grass area, so it has to be green. I was able to take risks and feel more freedom when I was painting. They were very, very important aspect of this particular project. And coming up, you're going to see some smaller ones too. But I want to talk first about these two big paintings. They're 30 inches round. They're actually round panels. I had them custom built. They are like beautiful, fine pieces of furniture. They're phenomenal. And the one on the left is called Wilderness. And the one on the right is called Orchard. And they both have different feels, but yet they speak really, really well to each other. The blue sky inside the rabbit in Wilderness relates to or converses with the blue sky inside Orchard. And those apples, God, I just love those apples. They thrill me. And there was a point in my life when they didn't thrill me and I cursed their existence because the painting just wasn't turning out the way I thought it needed to go. But ultimately I had to get out of the way of what I thought and let the painting become what it was supposed to be. And then those apples were utterly perfect. But what I find interesting in both of these paintings is that the darkest values in each of the paintings, they sort of carve out a hole or some sort of schism or tearing of the surface itself. And that makes the whole image become all the more vulnerable and all the more precious and beautiful, because there's this sensation that there's some deep darkness in there that you could reach into and pull out something mysterious from. And I really love that aspect with both of these pieces. And here is Wilderness up close. I also love how her sky, the negative space behind the fox, it feels like it's on fire to me. And our world feels like it's on fire often. And that of course was me responding to the chaos, the threat, the fear of a world that's on fire in the painting. And here's a closer look at Orchard. There's a really beautiful, peaceful nuance that happens in the negative space or the lighter areas of the fox, which are essentially a softer pattern version of the apple tree and the branch work itself. It's just scaled differently, but it's an echo, something that's similar, but yet a little bit different. And I love building differences up in my work. Now, these are little tiny 6-inch square paintings. And these were the origins of the 12-inch foxscapes that you saw. So these little ones, which were utterly delightful to make, happened over the course of many months. Well, they were basically my summer project. I had a stack of probably 40 of these little 6x6 panels, and I just kept working my way through them. And when the paint got too thick on one, I would set it aside and let it dry and move on to the next. So it was a really great opportunity for me to experiment with different colors that maybe I don't always use in my palette, to try different types of mark making, and to just have fun, to explore. This one, I love the gold that you see across the ridge of that mountainous shape in the background is actually a gold paint pen. It has a little bit of a shimmer to it. It's really beautiful when you see it in person. And it almost reads the same as that ochre yellow that's at the bottom of the painting that's really thick. It reads the same as that until you look at the painting from an angle and you realize that it's actually got a little bit of shimmer to it. I love when there's surprises like that in my work. This one, I feel like that pink line work in the lower left corner, that feels to me like roots or maybe burrows, or, it's possible that the fox has generations of lineage in this particular space. And so she's really connected to the earth in that way. I tried to think in a more abstract way about what the landscape encompassed or meant to me. I started or tried to think about it like if I were to take a slice of it, I would be able to see the crust of the earth and maybe some underground water systems or perhaps some other sorts of geographic rock formations and things. I thought of the fox in this one as being in a little magma, a core of magma, like the fox heart was the heat that fills the earth. And of course, I took great liberty with arbitrary color. So in lots of instances, my skies maybe are not blue. My dirt or ground areas are not brown like they might be. I love this purpley alizarin sort of dirt color here. The sky was a limit, and anything, my rule was anything goes with these. It was just a matter of playing with my gut, listening to the piece, asking myself, what if I did this? And then just doing it. And, you know, it was no big deal. It was a little 6-inch painting. So if it didn't turn out, it just got shuffled to the bottom of the pile and another, you know, got another pass the next day. I just realized when I was looking at the slideshow earlier today that to me, when I made this, I felt like the fox was going into a cave, but now I also see a horse in here in the cave or the rock formation above the fox. And horse is another one of my totems. So that was an interesting little aha for me. This is probably one of my favorites of the foxscapes. And this little fox, she has her personal rainstorm. And I don't know why that resonated with me so much. I did 2 little rainstorm foxes on the same day together, but this one just, I feel this one. I know I've been there. I know I have felt like I had my own little rain cloud over me at times too. And this fox reminds me, this is like if the Trojan horse were a fox, that's what this little painting would be. With a snippet of beautiful blue sky above her, and then, you know, the other 2/3 of the painting are pretty abstracted, but it does still feel like a landscape. I look at these and they make me smile, and I think that's what I want my art to do, is really to elicit smiles when people look at it, as well as to get them to question or rethink or view a subject or an object in a new light. Now, these pieces that you're going to see next, these are my mixed media drawings. These are all 18 by 24, and they're kind of like a whole kitchen sink worth of different types of tools, paint application. And these were done in the same fashion as those little foxscapes, where I would have a stack of a dozen of these going at the same time. And I would just work on one until it was too wet to work on anymore and set it aside and pick up the next one in the pile. And they were all drawn from memory without reference photos. And I was really seeking to find the mystery or the essence of the fox that showed up in my dreams. So disconnecting from the fox that I experienced in the real world and trying to plug into the sanctity of the fox that showed up or carried me through my dreams. And so there, you know, you'll see there's a huge difference in the ways that I have drawn or tried to capture her in these pieces. They all have very different feels, different personalities, even though they were done with, you know, by the same artist and with the same sorts of drawing and painting tools, just different combinations in each. And these pieces were part of, I did a huge body of these. I did about 70 of these pieces. And the bulk of those were in a show I hung last October, 2 Octobers ago, called Fox Medicine. And I brought back some of my favorite ones for this installation of Fox because I just felt like they needed to be seen again. And they absolutely did inform the pieces that I did, the paintings that I did for Fox, the whole process of making a mark, studying it, and then responding to it with another mark, and not necessarily trying to build something that felt representative of the literal world or the literal Fox, but that spoke to the more spiritual Fox that I encounter on a regular basis. This is one of the recycled drawings. And these are drawings that I started doing a couple summers back. They were a direct response to the mixed media pieces that you just saw. Same exact approach as the mixed media approaches or mixed media pieces, just a much smaller scale. This is literally an envelope from my recycling bin. I flattened it out. You can still see that there's that security window right there in the belly of the Fox. And I utilized the same drawing and paint application that I did in the mixed media pieces. The only difference was that my substrate was something that had been in the recycling bin. So scaling these down was a great exercise. Couldn't get a whole lot of detail in them. So that meant that the details, the elements that I chose to include had to do so with discernment and a little bit more care than with the larger pieces. I also did a lot of these with music playing. And so sometimes lyrics show up. This one's got a good amount of lyrics in it. So you may see handwriting embedded or buried in the layers of marks. And the titles of all of these pieces are song or band titles from my playlist. These drawings are also mounted on wood. So they're on a cradled wood panel. They can hang directly on the wall just as is. It was important to me that the viewer be able to appreciate them without the barrier of a pane of glass. And I also didn't want to formally mat them or put them in a frame because that sort of defeated the whole purpose of the fact that I was drawing on an envelope to begin with. I didn't want to dress up my substrate. I just wanted to present it in a straightforward and honest way. This one was done on craft paper. It was just a crumpled up piece of paper that came in a package as packing material. And so this one's sort of part envelope approach, part mixed media. And I thought it was really fun. This painting is called Elton. And when I was packing up my pieces this morning and bringing them back home, the gallery director told me that the younger students really loved Elton. They had lots of opportunity to come and sit in the gallery and talk about the work and also draw or create art in response to what they were seeing. And a couple days ago, they all came in and they sat with Elton one last time and they all drew from Elton. And so when I left, I gave the art teacher Elton for the younger students' classroom. And I'm not sure what it is about Elton that they connected with, but she did say over and over again that they loved the glasses, and the drawings that they created were just so precious and charming. And I felt like this piece was meant to stay with them if they connected to it in that capacity or at that deep of a level. This is a mixed media piece that was done on an 18 by 24 paper, and it just didn't quite work from a design standpoint in that rectilinear format. So I cropped it down to a square and it just became so much stronger. So this one's a little shy, or the panel that it's mounted on is 16 inches, but it's the same sort of approach, lots of charcoal and different drawing tools, along with a variety of paint. I just really love the softness Love the softness. This is titled Clouds after the Joni Mitchell song. Just seems really fitting given how soft the foxes are. Here's another piece that is done on packaging material, craft paper. I really love working on paper that has that value. It sets everything off. My whites seem, well, there's contrast between my whites, my lightest lights, and there's also contrast between my darkest darks. It just seems to add a whole nother dimension to the piece, which I appreciate. So all of these paintings are now listed on my website, which of course you guys, I'm sure you know all of that. Real quickly, I do want to share, whoops, let me bring up my preview here. And I do want to show you, where is it? This. So I mentioned at the onset that there were additional studies that were included as reference points or starting points for the show. And there was a huge long display cabinet. I couldn't back away to get it all in a singular photo, but this is the left side of it. And I'll show you the right side in a minute. But you'll see tacked on the back wall of the cabinet are a lot of my drawings, including some recycled work, some collage pieces. There is this really colorful one in the center at the top is a piece of my palette paper that I drew a fox over top of. There's some studies in here that I did on cardboard as I was trying to figure out, I took that landscape, that abstracted landscape approach to fox, and I tried to paint her really abstracted. So there's some cardboard pieces in here that represent that. You also will see there's some ephemera. I have bits of bark, some dried flowers, some crystals. These are all things that I use in my studio all the time for texture, the textures that end up in my paintings. I use a lot of feathers, seed pods, rocks, seashells, dried leaves, all sorts of things. Anything that when I'm out walking, if it draws my eye, I pick it up. And if it's still in my hand when I come home, it comes down in the studio, it goes in a bowl or on a shelf, and it becomes material for me to reach for when I'm working on a painting. So a lot of the little bits and details of the landscape elements in my paintings are actually done from a singular object that I can hold in my hand. But over here, you'll see in these images behind the jar of feathers, I have some more drawings that I did in Sharpie, on craft paper, on grocery bags even. I have some cardboard constructs, the layered ones that I built from my drawings. So these are actually dimensional, and they represent, or there's dimensional pieces of cardboard for each of the shapes of fox. There's a couple of envelope drawings here, and I have drawings on different sorts of substrate, including some that I dipped in wax, which makes the substrate transparent. So really enjoyed experimenting with all sorts of different media and seeing how it impacts the marks that I make, and then taking that knowledge and know-how to the easel when I'm working on a painting. So I feel like I've kind of gabbed enough, and I'd like to open the floor up a little. Wow, there's a lot of people here. My goodness, thank you. I don't know if you want to put your hand up perhaps, and I can ask you to unmute yourself if you have any questions. Maybe that would be the easiest way to approach that at this point. All right, I'm wondering if I can't see hands because the videos are muted or turned off. Oh, I see a hand, but I can't see whose it is. Karen. Karen, please unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. I came into your gallery a little bit late, about 10 minutes ago. Your stuff is so inspirational, and it's a pleasure to see you talk about it. So
I appreciate you being here on a Thursday evening in one of the busiest months of the year. Thank you for that, Karen.
You're welcome.
Did you have a question?
For everybody else, I'm looking at an iPad, and the hand option is associated with 3 dots and the word more.
And the more, yes. It's buried in that menu. And really, if you don't want to unmute yourself, you can pop a question in the chat. Now that I'm not screen sharing, I can actually see chats too. So I can respond to things over there.
Alrighty.
Lori, I see you've got your hand up. Thank you, Karen.
Oh, I think you're so fabulous.
You're my favorite person, Lori. Thank you.
I feel like I'm your stalker. I send you love notes every day. I just think you're wonderful.
Thanks.
I have a question. I'm looking at that gorgeous painting behind you, for example. How much time do you think went into that?
I could be I could just make a joke and say that 57 years went into that painting.
Yeah.
Because I really do feel that my strongest work pulls on all of the things that I've learned throughout the duration of my time as a creative. It's hard to assign a painting or pinpoint and say this took me 40 hours, because while I maybe actively painted on the piece for 40 hours, I probably spent 20 or 30 hours sitting right here on my couch looking at the darn thing, trying to figure out what came next.
Yep.
And also, what about all of the other studies that I did prior to that painting, all of the drawings and things that maybe at the time I didn't know where that knowledge I was accruing was going to end up. But
right.
it all sort of funnels or channels together and impacts the piece. So for me with my work, I can't really sit back and say it took this amount of time. And I can also tell you this painting went through so many, she had lots of stops where I thought she was done and then I realized she wasn't. Whereas sometimes a painting will show up and I can get it done in 2 or 3 days. But that is not the norm for me. The norm for me is that there's a relationship, and that relationship can take a good amount of time to tease out.
Excellent. I think you're wonderful.
Thanks, Lori.
Merry Christmas, darling.
Thank you so much. The same to you. Let's see. Deborah, I see your hands up.
There, I'm unmuted. So much of your work resonates with me on a lot of levels because it's nature.
Mm-hmm.
And your quest to take what's inside you and make it external and visible.
Mm-hmm.
I was really touched with the painting behind you, Metamorphosis, with the ginkgo leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ginkgo tree evolved some 170, 180 million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been so much metamorphosis through that. And since then, I think it gives your picture a real timeless quality.
Thank you.
And I wondered, has all of this that you've been doing in any way changed your relationship with Fox in your dreaming world?
That is a fascinating question. And somebody else asked me a similar question at the opening of the show. And I don't think I have an answer to that yet, because I feel like my relationship with Fox is evolving. just like relationships with human beings, you know, with our partners or our children or loved ones, they're always changing. And so I don't feel like Fox is a static object. Although I also kind of feel like Fox is my own Velveteen Rabbit in a way too. There's a lot of magic in her and mystery to her. And I don't think I'm ever going to fully understand it. And I'm okay with that. I think that's part of the appeal, is that, you know, this unknown, this knowing, but this unknowing. We don't have to say what it is between us. We don't have to label it. It just is. And I feel that way about all of the animals that I paint. And the paintings that I've done for the last couple of years, I've only painted animals that I've experienced myself in my dreams and in the real world. And I get asked all the time, can you paint an elephant? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I can. The answer is I can, but I feel like it would fall short because I don't have a personal relationship with it.
Right.
So I don't know if that necessarily answers your question so much as it dances around it.
I just wondered if she showed up more or showed up differently, or something had evolved differently.
Well, I will share a recent insight that I had, which was kind of mind-blowing to me. And I have a mentor, Anna Seams, and I was working, or in a conversation we had a couple of months ago. She was speaking, it was in Thanksgiving, and she was giving thanks to the native tribe that occupied the land that she currently calls home. And she encouraged all of us to do that research, which I did. And would you not know, but the tribe that originally, or one of the tribes that lived in Michigan and came from the Canadian Windsor border, which is what my husband's family did, they're the Meskwaki, I'm probably not saying it right, Meskwaki tribe, and they were also called the Fox tribe. And when I learned that, it just, like, I was like, of course there were Fox people here.
That's cool.
In this area before I was here. And I feel like that's an energy that I'm kind of plugged into. I don't think I don't want to say that. I don't want to claim anything that isn't mine to claim culturally, but I feel like there's an awareness in my heart, in my soul. There was an opening that allowed some of that to come in at some point, and I'm just really grateful for it.
Yes. Thank you.
Is there another hand up, or is that, I think that's still Deborah's. You can see, if I'm reading chat like this is because my bifocals aren't strong enough. Alicia! Hi, Alicia.
I had to unmute myself. I'm just curious, like when you're cranking through a stack of like 70 panels, are you painting them literally one at a time? Do you just kind of do one and then go on to the next, or do you have several going at the same time?
Yeah, hold on.
Sort of a practical working method question.
These are some of my little foxscapes that are still in process. And I keep this right next to my cabaret. So when my larger painting is drying, if I'm in the groove and I want to keep making marks, I just go to this and I'll randomly pull something out and rotate it. You know, what does this tell? Oh, like, see this way? This becomes a really cool cave. And then we have sort of like this rock escarpment here. So I might think about how I could turn this into feeling more like a foreground with a mark or two. And then I move on.
So these little landscapes, you're just kind of making marks and seeing what evolves out of them. You're not kind of going at them with any sort of vision in mind ahead of time, right?
No, and honestly, that's sort of how I approach the bigger paintings too. Although they have a bit more construct with regards to there's an object. There's always a central object in my paintings that's typically animal centric. But yeah, I just put the paint down and think about or look for shapes, colorways, little, like maybe this little passage feels like it's watery. So, oh, wouldn't that be cool to put a fish in there, or to have like algae, or maybe enhance the surface of the water, exaggerate that somewhere. So I really, it's like playing a game of hidden pictures. What do I see? What makes me respond? You know, what area is my eye going to? Why is my eye going there? What does it remind me of? Well, let's invite it in and see. And if it doesn't work, it gets painted over. It's very
It's interesting to see your thought process.
Yeah, it's definitely not the way classical painting was approached, with the thumbnail study and your values balanced out and everything ahead of time. It's very much intuitive, stream of consciousness, sometimes train wreck style of work. That's a good question. Thank you for that. Judy?
Yes, I have a question. So are you in the process of getting these up on your website for sale?
They are all up on my website, and yes, they are all for sale. So feel free to visit that. There's a whole separate gallery. If you go to my paintings off of the navigation bar, you'll see that there's a fox at University Ligget Schools, and that would be all of the work that comprised this particular show. And I'll leave it there for a bit, and then I'll move it into my available paintings. But I do have two listings under paintings. I have an available paintings, which is specifically painted surfaces. I call them my talisman pieces, although I think I have a couple of abstractions in there also. And then I have the fox at University Ligget Schools. So that's where you can find available work. And when the originals do sell, I will make prints available, and there's a link to that off of my website on the shop tab.
Oh, thank you.
You are welcome. Thanks for asking. Are there other questions? I'm reading the chat. There's just some really sweet notes in here. Thank you so much. Karen.
Yeah, you have a beautiful studio.
I'm so
Now,
lucky.
oh, you are lucky, because I have, my studio is 2 feet by 1 foot.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I look at all these luscious acrylics and paintings, my stuff is all has to be about like here. And it's also in the bedroom, and the medium better not smell. So do you have any suggestions for people who work small?
I do. I absolutely do. So I have been in this studio space for 3 years. Prior to that, I had a 10-foot by 12-foot room in my home that did not have a door, with 3 children. And the room also was the homework room, the computer, it was kind of like, it was craziness. The thing about creating is that you don't need the perfect space to make the work in. And I know that sounds kind of hypocritical, because I'm sitting here in my little couch in my beautiful space, but I swear to you, I did not start out here. I started out painting at the kitchen table with a kid in a high chair and a kid in a clippy seat and a kid in a playpen, and trying to keep the juice boxes from going on my work. And I graduated from there to a dining room table, to working in the corner of a room, until finally I was able to carve out that singular small room in my home. And now I have the space. All that matters is that you show up and you do your best work. And if you have parameters in place, like spatial parameters or lighting parameters, or even materials parameters, like you can't afford to buy materials you want, that is okay. Make the best art you can with what you have, because it's really about the journey of making art. And while we love these paintings because they're beautiful and they will highlight and showcase moments along that journey, they're just a snapshot of the whole thing that we're doing. And the whole thing that we're doing is about learning to express ourselves. And you can do that in a closet with a flashlight if you have to. So, and then I guess the other more practical advice that I have is to make certain that everything in your studio space serves at least two purposes. So if you have a cabinet in there, make sure that it is fully functional to store the kinds of things that you need in there. If you're going to have a light in there, make sure that light's got the right bulb in it so that it is daylight balanced or serves whatever kind of artwork you're making. If you have a desk, can your desk hold your laptop? Can you slide your laptop off and put a pad down and draw or paint on it? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Everything in your room needs to serve two jobs, and then that way you're going to feel like the space is a little bit more useful. And then I don't know how practical this is in a room your size, but in my previous studio, everything in there had casters.
Oh,
So if I needed to, I could roll something out to make more space on the floor or to give me more elbow room around my easel. And that gave me the flexibility to work in a variety of sizes.
mhm, that's good.
And also rearrange if your work changes, if you decide, like right now I'm doing a ton of drawing, so I'm not spending as much time in the painting side of my studio, but I'm totally horizontally surface challenged behind me. I've got piles of paper and it's a hot mess. But yeah, you want to be able to have your space adapt to whatever you feel like making that day. Does that help you out?
Yeah, yes, and it is true. You have to do it every day.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
And it isn't about the scale of the work you make. It's about the heart that you put into the work that you're making.
I agree with that. Very good. Thank you.
You are welcome. You are very, very welcome.
Good.
Are there other questions? I'm cracking up reading these things in the chat. You guys make me so happy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh, Linda, if you are still here and lurking, I love you. You are. Thank you for coming, Linda. Linda accompanied me she was my date to the Kentucky Derby. We had fun together. All right. Well, I do want to share that Fox isn't going anywhere. Obviously, she's all over the walls behind me. She is changing. Well, someone asked a really great question about how my relationship with her was changing, and I said it was evolving. I think the way I make artwork about her is also evolving, and I'm finding that the drawings are that I've been doing the last few weeks, they feel very intimate and much more personal. Maybe because they're not as polished or they're not as distracting because there's no color to them. But I feel like there's a profound depth to my own connection to Fox that these drawings really showcase or highlight. And I'm excited to see how the drawings move and shift as I continue to do them, and then ultimately how they impact the paintings that I'm going to make, because it's all full circle. Everything pollinates each other. So I'm really excited to continue to work, and I'm actually thinking that maybe I need to do another one of these when I have 20 or 30 drawings to share. It might be fun to just schedule a Zoom and create a slideshow and invite you all over, and we can have a chat again from pull up seats in my studio and talk together. So if you think that's something you would be interested in doing, don't be shy, let me know. I would love to hear from you. And if you are watching this video or here in person still, and you're not part of my actual mailing list, because I know a lot of you found me through social media, which is fantastic. But social media pushes the information to you, and there's an algorithm behind that, so you don't necessarily get all my updates. If you want to be informed or notified every time I have a new painting, for instance, sign up on my newsletter. And there's a link on my website, which is kimberlysantini.com. Throw your email address in there. I send one or two out a week, depending on how productive I'm being. But they'll always include a link to a painting like Metamorphosis behind me, along with the opportunity to see her in greater detail in a room setting and all that on my website. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, please don't be shy and sign up on my website. And that way we can stay in touch and not rely on any algorithms. So there you have it. I am so grateful for everybody that showed up tonight, and I wish you all a really beautiful season. I know this can be a wonderful time of year for many, and it can also be a pretty crappy time of year for just as many. And no matter where you sit on that spectrum, I'm sitting with you. And I want to thank you for being part of my community here in the studio and for supporting my art. You supported it tonight, you showed up. So I really value that. Thank you, everybody. I wish you the best. And until the next virtual opening, all right? Bye. Thanks again.